Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Black Women in Corporate America. I'm your host, Nicole S. Palmer, author of Playing the Game While Black Women in Corporate America. As you can see, I'm doing something a little bit different today, something that's very outside of character for me. I'm just experimenting to see what it feels like to be on camera. I hate being on camera, if I'm being very honest. You see a lot of lighting going on. That's because I'm in front of my window, and if I move a little bit like this, you'll see it adjusts a little bit more. And because the sun's going to go down pretty soon, so it is going to look a little different. Let's see if I can adjust it a different way. I'm on my iPad, obviously, or maybe not. I'm see. Let's see. I don't know if this works a little bit better. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. It's a little teetering because of my mic. Let's see. Oops. I got the hat going on because it's super sunny over here. So I'm gonna give this a shot. So bear with me, see how this goes. I've got a little MacGyver situation going on here. As I mentioned to you, I have this small mic that hubby just purchased for me, and it's weird for me to hold on to this tiny little mic. I'll show you the other one. I'm going to talk into it just to do a double interference, but here's what it looks like. Really tiny. I like how I just zoomed out like that. So, not a fan. And, okay. Didn't. Let's see. Anyway, these are really small, so I don't want that. I've clipped it essentially to the muffler. Is that what they call it? Wish my husband here, I can ask him. Anyway, I've clipped it to my thingamabob over here. So that's why this looks like that. I could probably use my big microphone, but I don't feel like messing with it right now. So here we are. So all that said, I'm gonna give this a little whirl and see how we do. Don't know if I'm gonna actually stay on camera, but I'm gonna try to get comfortable with it. Actually, my sweet spot right here. As you can tell, not very comfortable. Working on it. Work in progress, as they say. I might work better. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. I'll go with that. Anyway, welcome to episode 3 of Black Women in Corporate America. I'm your host, Nicole S. Palmer. Probably not going to look right at the camera. I'm going to look straight ahead. I think that's what we'll start with, at least for now, until I get a little comfort, because I know, God knows, I'm going to need to get comfortable with this, because I'm talking about a best-selling book, and I hate being on camera. I prefer being behind the scenes. I prefer hiding behind the curtain. That is my sweet spot right there. But you know what? Here we are. Yes, I'm rocking the hat because it's still really sunny out. We'll see how long it lasts while I'm talking here. So we'll see what happens. All right. I just had to make sure I was actually recording, because for the moment there, I wasn't sure. So anyway, I'm rocking the half shadow face, as you can see. But anyway, here we go. So this is about as unscripted as it's going to get, right? In terms of this podcast. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it's going to get even more scripted than this, but here we go. Sorry, I'm going to take a little bit of water. All right, so last week, I talked to you a little bit about how I came into the game, so to speak, when my coworker made this commentary on what she thought of my ability to play the game and how she thought I played it really well. Although we all know that there was a whole bunch of shade behind that, as she was saying it. But that said, I thought about today's topic, and what would be the most logical thing to talk about for this episode. And I'm thinking to myself that we should talk about the rules of the game. In my book, I actually allude to this. I don't allude to it. I come right out and say it. There are 7 universal rules to playing the game. And yes, I definitely believe that is 100% to be true. And I outlined them in the book. And so I thought it'd be actually pretty good to talk about one of the rules of playing the game, one of the 7 universal rules that I developed or came up with, came upon, whatever you want to call it. And I alluded to it last week. So we're going to unpack just one of those rules, because if you want the rest, you've got to get the book, right? We're going to talk about rule 1 and a little bit of insight behind that and go from there. I want to unpack it a little bit and hopefully have a conversation around it, around rule 1 and some of the takeaways as I came to understand it. And rule 1 seems almost obvious because I saw it play out in my own life, even though I'd been in corporate America by then. By the time I got to this particular role, I'd already been in corporate America. I was going on to the 2nd decade of being in corporate America. So to make this discovery or learn this when I was well into the game was it was helpful, but it definitely took me aback. And what I came away with was the fact that even though everyone clearly understands that we play the game on some level, there is a game afoot, if you will. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, so I'm pretty sure that's who said the game is afoot. If not, that's embarrassing. But anyway, so what was interesting was that she was very clear with identifying that I was playing the game and I was doing it well. And others around me were also. But it wasn't until she was calling me out, essentially, that I even had that conversation about the game. And that's what led me to rule 1. And rule 1 is nobody talks about playing the game. And it's very much, I'm probably going to date myself on this, but that's okay. But if you guys have watched Fight Club, I did. It was really good. I won't spoil it for you if you've never watched it. It's with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, if I'm remembering correctly. But if you ever watched the show, or sorry, not show, a movie, it's the entire premise or the first rule about Fight Club is nobody talks about Fight Club. And that's rule number 1. And I think rule number 2 is C rule number 1, if I'm remembering correctly. It's been a while since I saw it. But it's very much the same way when it comes to the game in corporate America. Nobody talks about playing the game. We're all playing it at some level. Some of us are well in it, doing our thing, commanding the board, taking prisoners. But others of us, like myself, don't even know we're playing. We're just thinking, okay, I'm doing my job, I'm showing up, I'm doing, this, I'm doing extra, whatever the case we're thinking. But we're not at all ever necessarily knowing or realizing we are playing the game. And so that, to me, was so important about establishing, because it's really a critical rule. If you don't know you're playing, how can you succeed? How can you play with purpose? How can you own the board or command the center, as I call it in my book, if you don't know you're playing? So I thought that was something really important I think especially for Black women, where we already feel like the rules are set so much more differently and structured than for anyone else. And to come into a corporate space, and it doesn't matter what kind of corporate space or where you are, but to come into a corporate space where you don't feel like the playing field is level. So that's already bad enough. But then you add the layer of the fact that nobody's telling you there's a whole other set of rules happening outside of the handbook that they're going to hand you, outside of any code of conduct that they'll provide you. There's a whole other set of rules for us. There's the whole idea of that Leah Goodrich breaks down really well in her work about professionalism as a racial construct, which I think is so powerful. And that notion that there's a certain level of professionalism assigned or expected of Black women that is not expected of anyone else, that in itself is huge. And no one tells you about that when you walk in. And probably because, to be honest, most of us are just trying to survive. Most of us are so focused on our own game play, or most of us are so focused on just trying to get through the day that we're not really trying to check for anyone else or worry about anyone else. And so we go into it unwittingly and not realizing that there is a different set of rules for us. So I definitely wanted to share that and really talk through that. The other part of that again ties into it, because these are all elements, parts of the larger whole. How you're expected to communicate, right? You have to be assertive, but not too assertive. You have to speak up, but not overshadow, not even speak over, but don't speak up to the point that it takes away shine from someone else. So there's this push, pull, give, take that you're not even aware of unless you start picking it up, right? And then you start realizing, oh, okay, I need to figure some stuff out. And so that's definitely something that I saw when I looked back as I wrote this book, because it was definitely a retrospective is really the term. I didn't have the advantage of the foresight. You do, if you're sorry in it right now, but I didn't have the advantage or foresight of telling younger me, hey, these are the things you need to know. So I'm here, go back in time, warn my younger self and say, here's everything you need to know, because you're going to deal with some things. I didn't have that foresight. So it was I think it's safe to say it's a very steep learning curve, especially for Black women. And the more ambitious you are, this is what I have found. So don't at me, don't come for me on this. I have observed that the more ambitious you are, the harder, not only is it the harder to learn, but the harsher the rules are towards you, if that makes sense. Okay. And so that's why I thought it was so important, okay, to really set the stage. Let's first talk about the fact that we're not even talking about the fact that we're playing this game. Yes, we have these different conversations around it, but we don't really talk about it. There's, like they say, there's a difference between liking someone and then liking someone, right? There's two levels, right? And so when it comes to the game, there are layers. And that's what I have found, is that we don't really talk about the game in a way that helps us get a little bit of an advantage. And a lot of what I see, unfortunately for us as Black women, is we have these powerful stories that we see after we've gone through, we've got to go through the hell. And then once we go through the hell, we learn all these things that, like, man, I just known this 10 steps ago or 3 jobs ago. In some cases, my life could have been different. So I really wanted to break that down because it's not, as I say in my book, it's not a meritocracy. It isn't. Anyone who tells you that corporate America is a meritocracy hasn't been paying attention. And you don't have to even go far. You know what I'm talking about. So we're not even gonna have to get into that. To be clear, I really want for us, because again, I'm establishing a community, and that is the entire goal. And so I'm pulling back the curtain. We're gonna talk about stuff that maybe people are not gonna be clear and talk about. And maybe we are, but we need to broaden the conversation. And that's what I want to do. I want us to stop doing this where we're learning stuff and then we're going to keep it to ourselves. And we need to be more comfortable, and maybe comfort isn't the right term. We need to be more open with each other, especially with each other as Black women. We have to help and lift each other up. And I won't go down that rabbit hole, but to be clear, the rules have never, ever been level, or the stage, the board, whatever you want to call it, has never been leveled in our favor. And if we can get to a place where we're at least having those conversations about those very things, imagine what we could accomplish. Imagine what could be possible. I like to dream big and think that we can get to a place where more young Black women, more driven Black women, more excited Black women they have the tools they need to really make it, and to identify quickly if something is not a good fit. And I think we're getting better. I think I will say that this generation now, and it sounds weird for me to say that because not that it even makes me feel old. It's like I've lived long enough to talk about another generation that came after me. So that feels a little wild to me. So that's more from that perspective, to think about the fact that, man, I'm talking about kids these days. So that's crazy. And it's wild. It's what it feels like to me. So I do feel like this generation is much more in tune with their feelings and with maybe their gut in a sense. And I'm happy to be wrong here, but I've seen, and maybe I'm doing it from the surface or periphery, so maybe I'm misspeaking on this, and I'm happy to correct myself if that is the case. But I do feel like this generation is much more, we're not having that. You want me to do what? No. We don't work on weekends. We don't work after hours. And man, that is awesome. I wish more of us had done that. I wish more of us had that courage and the fortitude to stand up like that. But I also realize that there's a flip side to that. There is a flip side, because the truth of the matter is, it is a double-edged sword. You obviously don't want to give so much of yourself that you have nothing left. But on the other side of that, you have to balance it out. It's not always, let's burn our bras and let's walk out of the building and we're not going to put up with it, because there's still reality. What happens when the shoe falls and now you've got to face the consequences? So there is a balance. It is a balancing act. And that's really a lot of what I talk about in my book. You have to understand that there's a middle ground, and there's nothing wrong with the middle ground. And again, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're okay with having to find a new job every 3 to 6 months, then do you. And that's sincerely, I'm trying to be facetious. I'm not saying it to come down on anyone. I'm just being real. And this is something that just happened to me, honest. This is something that is recent and fresh, and I see what happens when you speak truth to power. When you speak up, when you speak out, there are consequences. And if you're okay with the consequences, don't ever change. Don't ever feel like you have to be anything other than 100% yourself. Don't ever feel like you don't have to be less than. And I hate that term, and I don't even think that's even the right term, to be honest. There, because it is a game, right? And if you think about the concept of gameplay, on some levels, it's not that deep, right? When you think about what a game really is, that means that if you're realizing it's a game, that there's a level of not seriousness to it. And I mean that in the sense that there is no game, absolutely no game. In other words, no job that is worth your life. And because that is the case, you have to be able to separate yourself enough from needing to always tell it like it is. When you think about, we can put a pin in chess for a minute. Let's think about the concept of poker, right? I don't know all the rules of poker, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I'm thinking from the perspective of the general premise of poker, right? When you're playing the game of poker, part of the concept, at least I know this part, I've seen enough movies and shows. Part of the premise is you're not supposed to show your hand. So that means that even though you might have a very good hand, you don't tell everyone you've got a good hand, because that's who you are, because that's you being 100% authentic and keeping it a buck, right? You don't go around and say, ooh, y'all could only see my hand, or this and that and the third. You don't do that. You hold back. You keep that to yourself until the right time, right? You hold your cards. That's what the concept, I believe, and I'd have to look this up. So I believe that's where the concept of holding your cards close to the vest comes from, where you're not giving away or tipping away your hand. And so when you think about that from the perspective of corporate America, the board, as I call it, it's okay to hold back some of yourself. In fact, it's safer. In fact, it probably will be in your best interest. Everyone doesn't need to know everything. Everyone doesn't need to know your whole life. Everyone does not need to know your business. Everyone doesn't need to know this is how you feel about them. Unless, again, if you're good with your corporate life being a revolving door, then this is not advice you need to listen to. But if you're trying to have some level of peace, some level of stability, some level of just no drama, you have to have some restraint. And that's so critical for us, because I see this, like I said, this revolution where what we're talking about, doing that very thing, being in our authentic selves, we're not going to put up with this anymore. I agree to some level, but there's also my more practical self, the more pragmatic me that says everything doesn't need to be said. Everything doesn't need to be shared. Everyone doesn't need to know how you feel about them at work. You can talk to your friends about it. You can talk to your confidants. You can talk to your family. But everyone does not need to know how you feel about them, because it can hurt you. There are people who are messy enough and pressed enough to want to destroy your career or get you fired. There are people who are like that, even though you're not that person. There are people out there who want you to fail, who want you to be out of a job, and they don't have any problem whatsoever doing everything they can to ensure it happens. And with that in mind, I just want us to be more mindful of seeing that clip going around about being demure and all that. And God been insane before we saw that come out. But there's something to that. And something to keep in mind, just being reserved, it's okay. I'm a big fan of the soft movement for us as Black women, 100% all in, all for it. let's be soft. Let's be laid back. Let's not, everything doesn't need to phase us. Everything does not require a response. Sometimes you can clock something and just clock it and keep it pushing. And just remember for next time, you know what it is. And that's all it can be. It doesn't have to be anything further than that. So once I understood this rule one, that nobody talks about playing the game, I started really studying it. And I guess it's just the same way how the greats in any sport are not going to give away their secrets. I suppose it's the same way. But I do believe in a lot of ways when it comes to corporate America, for us as Black women, it is a team sport. Or it should be. Maybe it isn't, but it should be. I wish that it were, because I think if more of us acted like it was, more of us might succeed. More of us might do, more of us might actually be up in the boardroom or sitting in spaces where we can, those of us in the back and we can say, oh my goodness, she looks just like me. I can do this too. It's tough out here to think that, okay, you're the first, you're the only. Let's bring people along when we can. And I know it's not always possible. And again, I talk about this in my book too. There's a specific participant I talk about in my book that really is the essence of what holds us back in a lot of ways, especially when we get to certain levels of authority or supposed authority. So it's not always possible, but I hope that more of us realize that we are better together, and there is 100% safety in power numbers. I 100% believe that. So I do hope, excuse me, I hope that we do get to a point where we are working together, working as a team. Maybe that sounds very pie in the sky, but that's what I'm hoping for us. And that's going to require us talking about the game. And that's why it's rule one. Because once you realize that there is a game, then you're going to start clocking all the people around you that are playing it and how they're playing it, and understand why they move how they move. You'll start understanding it. It'll start making sense, because you'll see them not as just a colleague or a leader or whatever like you want to add there. You'll see them as a player, because that's what they are. They're a participant in the game, and then it will change your perspective. So I'm hoping maybe this could start. I like to shake things up a little bit, and maybe this is the first attempt at doing something a little bit different and getting us to a place where we're having those conversations where that is no longer rule one. It is no longer the norm that we don't talk about the game, that we are actually talking about it, that we're willing and open and courageous to have those conversations and to have them together and to put down the pretense. And we all know, obviously, that there is a difference between talking about the game in mixed company. We don't do that. Not what I'm suggesting here at all. I'm talking about playing, and I'm talking about the game among ourselves and with each other. That's where the power is. And it's really, when you think about the things that happen, this is something else that ties to it. When you think about the things that happen in the dark, in the secret, in the shadows, they have a lot of their power because they happen in those spaces, because no one dares even whisper those things. And they continue to have power, and they continue to thrive and to excel because no one is willing to speak on them. And I see this as the same way. I see a lot of the pervasive issues that we struggle with a lot of the challenges that we have as Black women. We're only just starting to talk about them. And I think it's great, but I think we also need to talk about not just, here's what I struggled with. Let's talk about what we did to succeed, what worked, what didn't. There is no harm in sharing and having a shared playbook. And that's what this, to me, for me, it was me sharing my playbook, because I'm on the tail end, folks, to be very honest with you. I'm on the tail end of my journey, and I'll get more into that later, but that's where I'll leave it. I am 100% on the tail end. And even if I wasn't, and I made this realization halfway through, and to be honest, I don't think I would have. I think it happened the way it happened because timing is everything. And this particular journey, or whatever you want to call it, needed to happen the way that it did. So I'm going to share my playbook. I'm going to share the playbook that you need, because it's all broken down for you. And we're going to have those conversations here. I do expect to have guest hosts on here. I am already having conversations with some individuals that represent the individuals in the book that I talk about, specific archetypes and personalities. And so we'll talk about that. And I want to just have that conversation. Like I said, it's about peeling back the curtain. It's about calling it by its name. It's about just being very clear and blunt about the fact that there is a game, and moving forward and deciding that we're no longer going to not talk about the game. We're going to talk about it. We're definitely going to talk about it here. So if you're looking for some pointers, if you're looking to move past that, then you're in good company. You're in very good company. So I'm at time. My goal is to keep these chats to right around 30 minutes. And we're right in that sweet spot. This was a very impromptu decision to get on camera. Still second guessing the decision, but it is what it is. And I'm excited to see where we go with this. I'm excited to continue the conversation, and I'm excited to hear from you. So as I'm starting to do is I'm going to leave you with something to think about, and hopefully to share and engage with me either here on LinkedIn, anywhere you find this podcast, anywhere you can find podcasts and leave me a message, put it that way. So you can do that on YouTube. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can even send me a message on my website, NicoleSPalmer.com. So wherever you'd like to share, I want to ask you a question, because I've come up with these 7 universal rules, and they are very universal. And if you get a chance to read the book, you will see all 7 of them. But maybe you have your own rules. So maybe you can tell me, what is one unwritten rule you've encountered in your career? Maybe it's something you wish you known earlier, or something you've only just figured out. It's very possible. So leave me a comment down below. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and post a comment or send me a message on LinkedIn. Preferably leave me a comment here on YouTube. Let's get this community built up and going. I'd love to hear from you. And let's go from there. So thank you so much for joining me for episode 3. Really happy to have you here. And I'm happy to see you next Saturday, episode 4. Sorry, I'm going back and forth. I get a little fidgety when I'm a little nervous. Let me try to bring myself in. Yeah, I want to see you here next week at 7. Thank you for joining me today. And until next time, take care.